course, there is a lot of trouble in the country as far as the economy is concerned. There are those who believe that Nigeria currently bears too much burden in terms of debts that we've gotten outside of the country. But local and foreign debt, in fact, the DMO, the Debt Management Office, had warned both state and the federal government about further borrowings. Now, there are those who say that the federal government should look into borrowing. At some point in the early stage, the federal government was not too attuned to borrowing, but now it looks to me that borrowing might be the way. We'll be getting to know what exactly the issue is. But before we get into that, everyone, when the president has promised and said, look, there will be some injections, $1 trillion US. That's what the president expected. Wale Edun, the Minister of Finance, said, in the coming weeks, we will be seeing up to $10 billion US injected. The president has also said there will be a calm in terms of the FX troubles. How will that also pan out? Those are the issues that we'll be looking at. But then let's go into what happened today in London. So there is a case where there was a deal with the federal government of Nigeria that accompanied P&Id to construct a gas processing. I'm summarizing this for you so you get a sense. It's a long story that spans several years, since 2019 or so. In all of this, the deal went sour. In fact, it was found out that the deal was fraudulent, and there are some accomplices on the Nigerian side that aided a company that can only be found in some tax haven. I mean, if you find them, you may not be able to physically locate them. That is what the findings have told us, and we are understanding that some of the deals and the contracts engaged with the Nigerian government and this company were obtained fraudulently. Now, some people have been arrested, some people have been jailed. This case went on in Nigeria. It went over in the United States, in the United Kingdom. There was a $6 billion US, there was $1 million that was supposed to be paid as an award. But the federal government said no. Under the Buhari government, where it was pursued, and today there was a judgment. So Justice Robin Knox of the Commercial Court of England and Wales ruled in favor of Nigeria in the enforcement of a $11 billion process and industrial development P&Id limited arbitration award, which means that Nigeria has narrowly escaped paying that sum of money. $11 billion US. Where can we get that money from? And it's not a joke. When this kind of judgment comes, you will pay. So let's get a sense, because this is all legal matters. And did we get into this trouble in the first place? How can the Nigerian government get into a contract with a fraudulent company in a fraudulent way, in a fraudulent award? Mr. Biodun Owonikoko, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, joins us live here to discuss these issues and what has become a major legal event in Nigeria's legal stories. Thank you so much indeed for coming tonight.
It's my pleasure, Sheon.
It's a relief. How would you describe it?
Well, I think UK has given us a lifeline to let us breathe, like Mr. President will say. The first time this news broke, I was shocked. It was my 18-year-old daughter from London that called me and said, "Daddy, how did this happen? Who are the lawyers of Nigeria that this..." So we are going to all be... He said, "We are going to have to pay debt the rest of our life." My daughter was saying that. She could see that this debt was not going to be paid by us. It's by them. So thank goodness that rule of law rescued Nigeria. In the sense that I've read a bit of the judgments of the UK Commercial Court. And we need to be realistic. A number of things that happened that culminated in this liability essentially were blamable on our own Nigerian system. Because I could see, regardless of what you could say about the profile of that company, I could see consistently they have been doing business with Nigerian government institutions for almost 20 years. Critical contracts with Nigerian police, Nigerian army, all of them were detailed in that judgment, dating back to 1992, 90, whatever, in millions and millions of dollars. So that they were able eventually to also get this contract and railroad government to signing up and commit Nigerian government when even all the parameters to ensure that the project was implementable were not yet in place. What was this about? About gas supply for the project.
In Calabar.
It was the critical element in the entire process. If it did not exist, there was no basis to go into any contract. There were 3 or 4 failed attempts to access some private oil operators to access gas. Folawiyo was there, petroleum company, Chevron, there was a time Ajib, I saw all of them, ExxonMobil. It was when they could not find their way through this company that they decided to exploit the government option as the overall owner of gas resources in Nigeria. But then there was pressure for government to deliver on this policy on gas, and people were exploiting that. A lot of internal government officials seem to have compromised the interests of the sovereign nation to put us in this bind. So it's really sad.
I mean, so I like us to, because there's a lot of lessons that we need to learn as a people and as individuals, of course. And what would have been a disaster if that judgment was against Nigeria, if it came against Nigeria, what do you think would have happened?
Well, Nigeria will probably cease to be a going concern economically. Human beings will be here, land will be there, but it will not be a going concern. Already, without that liability, we can see how we are struggling to get sufficient forex to even do the normal international trade that our companies in Nigeria are engaging, because the forex challenge is there. If we were to confront this amount of money, which would then be enforceable because they had gone to enforce in England. Don't forget that I read in the judgment that initially, in fact, they did something. They were going to put the law applicable to be foreign law and also the venue to be foreign. There was a negotiation to now make it Nigerian law, but London as seat of arbitration. That actually probably saved. If the matter had been in Nigeria, I'm not even sure we'll have gotten a favorable judgment that has come in our favor in England. There are so many dodgy debts now that the Nigerian government is carrying in its books, obtained from Nigerian courts. Collusive judgments where people will go and compromise.
Garnishing orders,
all sorts, running into trillions.
And the agencies of government are also involved. They are in this debt, and it's all over the place.
In fact, some of them are rider claims, derivative claims from people who claim to have played a role to facilitate those debts being incurred. And they are even suing on it, and our courts are giving them judgment.
Yeah, the federal government has come out to say there are a lot of judgment debts that the federal government has incurred that they need to start clearing. And you look at it, how did we get here? The Office of the Attorney General, over the years, and the Minister of Justice, what are they doing to ensure that the nation is insulated? Because what these companies had done was to ensure that if this award implementation was to happen, we would have been in trouble because we have debts, foreign debts that we're servicing. We had foreign investment that we're looking at. Most of our investments in Nigeria are dependent on foreign...
So, do you want me to surprise you?
Please, go ahead, sir.
The bulk of foreign Nigerian debts owed by government through court orders arose from Nigeria receiving debt bailout from international creditors. That's what they call Paris Club debt. People now generate new debt out of Paris Club debt, claiming that some monies were not properly reconciled and monies were owed to some arms of government, and people came up as consultants, claiming that they have found debts, and then assisting them through governor's forum, whatever, to recover money. Only last year or early this year, Supreme Court came down heavily that debt owed to state authorities cannot be subject of negotiation by some consultants. These are statutory debt, revenue of public revenue. What role are you playing? So go and sue the local government that you claim you recover for, or go and sue the state government, not some kind of governor's forum or whatever. Now, imagine how much of that. I know there's upwards of almost $500 million is subject of one of these debts that people are claiming this is their own commission for assisting institutions to recover what they claim, unclaimed debt. But that misses me. I think what is important is for us to draw the right lesson from this judgment. I identified 3. In that judgment itself, there are about 11 of those kind of gas contracts entered into in 2010. This one is one. Yes. This is the only one that we know has become.
Have we exited those ones?
Well, I don't know. That's a job for.
There might be some troubles.
Because maybe those ones are still looking for a way out. So if there are 10 of those contracts and none of them I'm aware is already functioning, there might be issues there. That's number 1. Number 2 is this. How come it took Nigeria this terrible development for us to appreciate that there are weaknesses in how we draft agreement with international business entities, where we don't protect our own interest. And I believe that the President Attorney General of the Federation is one of the things he has identified that he wants to address. This issue of debt that is piled up and contracts that are skewed against Nigeria, and we end up having to be begging our way out of binds that the civil service and the technical people in government plunge the country into. We need to review that. We should review our contract documentation in terms of heavy investment projects, so that even if we need international consultants to assist us, and we need to come up with a template that can assist all government agencies to know that if you are going to a contract of this nature, these are the signals that you must identify and ensure that the clauses are so wide, so tightly drafted that we can at least predict the outcome of what we are signing.
Unfortunately, in all of these international conventions and international laws, there are a lot of gaps and loopholes that have now, they will dress it for you such that you don't know that those holes are there until you fall into them. Well, and unfortunately, I mean, like you have mentioned, this consultant, if need be, get them so that you don't have to incur this kind of, this is a huge embarrassment to our nation.
Beyond that, there is a positive. The outcome of this judgment will have been impossible if not for the role played by the EFCC, the local investigation agencies. If you read that judgment, a lot came out of discoveries that the court ordered, and P&Id had to reveal so many information, electronic format, documents, from which Nigeria was able to extract sufficient evidence to sustain their case that there was bribery, there was corruption, and all whatnot. If that were to be in Nigeria, and I'm sure you're aware of things about discoveries going on now, we don't make enough use of those kind of facilities in investigation. And EFCC, while the case was on, was able to even make arrests, detain, and start prosecuting, even get conviction, some of which became available and useful to establish a convincing case of bribery. Another thing I saw in the judgment, which we also have to look at, is that when it came to the issue of determining the question of dishonesty, the court in England decided that dishonesty did not have to prove beyond reasonable doubt. Unfortunately, in Nigeria, anything that
is criminal
appears to look real and they say you must prove beyond reasonable doubt. There's no way you can fight corruption through the court system if almost everything that have a stinge of criminality must be proved beyond reasonable doubt. If that was to be the position in England, we probably would not be out of the woods by now. So we also have to go and look at our laws. It's not only about just prosecuting. Look for things that you can do that will ensure people know that things they compromise can be easily detected. And if it's not the present regime that gives you that cover, a new regime can come and then they will be exposed.
Mr. Wonikoko, I need to also let a lot of Nigerians who are watching today to also understand some of the background activities that happened. We understand, and I obtained an information from some circles, that the former Vice President, Yemi Osinbajo, was instrumental in identifying, maybe because a professor of law and a senior advocate, he was able to identify it. Kudos to him. And the president at the time, Muhammadu Buhari, who also helped, because if the president had looked away, there would have been a problem. His vice raised an alarm, alerted the nation about this. The president took it upon himself and asked the Attorney General, Abubakar Malami, to rise up to the occasion and make sure, kudos to Abubakar Malami and Muhammadu Buhari. Again, the FCC that you mentioned had done a lot of jobs also locally, gathered evidence that were very sufficient for us to be able to prosecute and get this kind of judgment. I think is also, as we're looking at the history and the background to this, to also mention these personalities that were involved up until this moment. And kudos to all of them that have done our nation proud today in making sure that this has not become an albatross that we'll carry for the rest of our lives as a country. But going from here is the fact that we are in a dire situation as a country economically. And this is just one out of a possible other mess legally that Nigeria might have found itself. If you had to speak to the Attorney General of the Federation and the President, what would you be telling them? Do they need to set up a consultancy or a unit or a committee to start looking at the possibility of other problems that may be waiting in the wings and in the dark for Nigeria?
Thanks very much. I think I need to make this point. I had the chance of meeting with former Attorney General in his office about a year ago. And I was saying to him that, as far as I'm concerned, the major achievement you have made in this your tenure was getting the P&Id judgment reopened for review. I said, because you have saved Nigeria about $10 billion. Whatever losses we have incurred in other things you have done wrong, this should be your signature achievement. And I'm happy today that not only did he prosecute that thing to that end, Prince Fagbemi has taken it up. Because don't forget, it was under his own regime now that this outcome has been achieved. But it's a collective effort. That said, the first thing I believe judgment compels us to do is for President or the Attorney General to order immediate audit of all signature contracts in the last 12 years when this incident happened, up until the last regime was exited. Let there be an audit of, in particular, maybe anything above maybe $100 million project contract that we are sure probably went through this kind of, underhand, execution. Yeah. They should subject them to serious intelligence review so that we can identify immediately the problem ones and begin to proactively find a way to manage those that we believe cannot be managed and those that need to be revoked, and then subject those participants in those contracts to criminal prosecution. I think that has to be done. Nigeria cannot afford to waste every single dollar that we are earning now to frivolous debt claims.
Now, one of the other areas that I fear the most is the role that civil servants played in all of this. Because government goes, government comes. The fact remains that there are civil servants who have entrenched themselves in this kind of corrupt practices. Civil servants are definitely involved in all of this. That had made this a very huge embarrassment for us, because in all of what has happened, the civil servants are the ones that have been involved in cahoot with some Nigerians who are accomplices with some of these P&Id guys, which has led into the discovery of the court. Mr. Wonikogo, if you look at some of these issues, which of course we will put the timeline on the screen, the role of the civil servants at the Ministry of Justice, in any of the MDAs, how much of a trouble does this bring? How can we checkmate some of the roles of the civil servant? Without the civil servant, government cannot function.
You're very correct, in the sense that they have an advantage. They are permanent officers of government, where political appointees go and come. So they have institutional memory of transactions. In fact, as soon as a minister is appointed, the civil servants are the one that will brief him. They tell him where all the skeletons are buried, or where the easy monies can be made, and then guide him on how to go about it. What that means, there was something that transpired in the course of the development in the proceedings in England. There seems to be an understanding that in Nigeria there is a culture that when public service do things for you, you're supposed to pay them something in return. And that's reflected in a lot of what we saw in that case. Foreigners come believing. Yes. Yeah. But there is a culture in Nigeria that says that when people do something for you, even as public duty, you must find a way to reward them, directly or indirectly. In another claim, that is corruption, pure and simple. But we seem to think it is normal that, if you work in a place, you should earn something there. Now, we have to address this issue of ethics of public service. And it's not only that. We should also find out what are the predisposing factors that make civil servants to fall prey and be so easily compromisable. What is their pay in terms of legitimate income that they will not be exposed? Why do we have special salary for people working in the banking industry, for people working in the oil industry? But the people that actually issue our contract in billions and billions in civil service, we think they can manage, a monkey pay. These are things that need to be addressed. Beyond that, we have to ask ourselves, honest questions. Why was it that this company tried to work with 3 different private companies? And because those ones had to do due diligence on their contract, they did not go ahead with them. But they only found the weakness in the government procurement system and then eventually enter into one with government. The 3 previous companies refused to go ahead because they had also their interests and they understood that, look, we cannot do this transaction, or this situation were not ripe for us to enter into a commitment. So when they failed with 1, 2nd, and 3rd, as the judgment shows, then they decided to explore the option of doing it with government, knowing that it's a lot easier to game.
And they knew that if they gave civil servants some money and gave some other colleagues, and they have their way.
They have their way. And their ultimate idea is that, look, commit government. Then later, will government to cough out what ordinarily we should have made doing business for 20 years. They went to. But do you understand one thing? In that award, interestingly, and that's one of the reasons why we have always said use Nigerian, as the venue for dispute resolution of Nigerian disputes. It was only Nigerian in the arbitral panel that dissented. Chivayojo was a member of the 3-man arbitrators. He dissented. He did not agree with the award.
Of 6.6.
Oh, yes, he did not. The other two were the ones that by majority gave the award. So you can see now the importance of venue and choice of arbitrators. And so we have to revamp some of these government policies about how we commit government to, heavy contractual obligations. That is something that I took home very seriously.
I mean, unfortunately, we couldn't have been able to go through. I would have been able to go through one
details,
after the other. The details of how the journey. Of course, this will be on Channels Television's website, channelstv.com, so that you will know how all of these happen, so that we don't get again into this kind of trap. NFC is such a great pleasure.
I congratulate Nigerians all the same.
I'm telling you, this is a big deal.
It's a big let-off. Not at this time should we be, cracking our head about how we are going to look for $11 billion.
$11 billion. And this is not the kind of money that you will run away from.
If it was confirmed, if the judgment was upheld, we'll have had to pay.
We will pay.
All we'll have been doing was negotiating on how to pay.
And through our nurseries too.
Of course.
Difficult one. Thank you so much indeed for your time tonight. And I'm hoping that there will be calling Mr. Fagbemi to task now. As we've seen in Lagos, there are led a lot of legal reforms in Nigeria. The federal government needs to start having some reforms in the civil service and in our legal system too, isn't it?
It is. And I'm happy that it's one of his signature policy thrusts that he wants to address the issue of debts, public debt. The Attorney General has made that one of his cardinal points of concern.
Right.
So this is probably an impetus for him to dig deeper.
For him to leapfrog into that.
Yes.
Mr. Biodun Wonikogo, thank you so much. Again, I must say, kudos, congratulations to the Nigerian people, first and foremost, the Nigerian nation, and of course, to the likes of Muhammadu Buhari, Yemi Oshibajo, Abubakar Malami, EFCC, and of course, the Solicitor General of the Federation and his team. Kudos to you guys for making sure that we did not enter into that trap and into that debt of embarrassment. Thank you so much indeed for talking to us tonight, Mr. Wood.
My pleasure.
It's an advocate of Nigeria.